I'm Amanda Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 199 of the podcast today. So today I got to chat over Zoom with local entrepreneur and Maryland native Cathy Sell. Cathy is currently a dental hygienist, but she's always had a love for art, and a few years ago, in her mid-30s, she doubled down on this passion with the launch of her business, Pink Sheep Designs, in 2017. On the podcast today, we talk about how the idea for Pink Sheep Designs developed and how Cathy built up her customer base and taught herself the skills she needed to excel as a web and graphic designer. We also learned throughout the conversation today that we both love running, so we talked about ultra running today, as well as how Cathy's year training for an Ironman really helped with her time management skills. So stay tuned for a wonderful conversation today to learn more about this local business and hopefully get some key takeaways to apply to your own business growth. So here at Rochester Rising, we're always trying to make sure that we're meeting a need in the community and creating things that you want. So to help out with this, we would really appreciate a few minutes of your time to fill out our survey to let us know how we're doing, what you are looking for, and what we could do better. So when you have a few moments, please click the survey link in our show notes and let us know how we can meet your needs better moving forward. All right, so now on to the podcast today with Cathy Sell and Pink Sheep Designs. Well, yeah, thanks for doing this today, Cathy. I really appreciate your time on a Friday where it feels more like December than October.
Sure.
I always like to start off asking you, where are you from? Can you share some of your backstory and what do you like to do with your time?
Sure. Well, I moved here when I was 10 from Maryland, so I pretty much consider Rochester home base. My dad worked at IBM and my mom worked at Mayo, like about 90% of all the kids I went to school with. And for the longest time, I knew where they went, but I had no clue what they did. So it finally took me till about 7th grade to figure that out. And then I ended up at a dental office in town at 19. I did move out to California for a short stint, which about 9 months, and that was enough for me. I said, it's time to get back home and figure my stuff out, or get my poop in a group, as my dad says. So I came back, and then I started working at a dental office in town, and strangely, dental kind of just fell into my lap, and it worked. And I started dating my now husband that same month I started that job. So we joked that everything I picked in that month, I just stuck with forever. And so I've always loved art and I've always loved that side of it. But I hate to say, but like I graduated high school in 95 and there wasn't a ton of art options in schools. And it seemed to be those were the fluff classes that kind of all the you hate to say like the burnouts, but they picked those classes. And so there really wasn't a lot of art stuff, that I felt was available at our age. So everything you did was just kind of on your own. And that's what led me out to California. I was like, I'm going to go to art school. I'm going to go out there with my friend. And 19 going out to California with no plan. This was pre-Google, so we couldn't Google how much apartments were. And so we were like, we can't afford it. So we moved back and not to say that I ever settled, but it was like, okay, it's time to be an adult. It's time to figure it out. And the art will just have to be kind of a side gig. And so worked happily in dental and, had 2 kids and got married and the whole thing. And all of a sudden at mid-30s, it kind of came around let's dust off these old, and I'd kind of been doing stuff on the side here and there, but then just to dust off the old art love and coming back into it late in the game. But, it's kind of one of those that, you're never too old, right?
I feel like that's such a common story. Like we all go on a path that we feel is going to be financially stable, especially if I'm the first person in my family to go to college. So it's setting yourself up to what you think will be, a really stable career. And then you find out maybe it's not, or maybe you just don't like it.
Right.
It's time to,
or there's other sides of you. You're not so, and I was just talking to a patient about this the other day. Our parents, especially, and the generation ahead of them, it was you picked your career and you stuck in it. And it was almost frowned upon if you went a different way, you were almost looked at like, oh, you're having this midlife moment. But now I feel like the younger crowd, which is, I think, amazing, you're almost looked down upon if you don't like try different things. And I have some people, you know, and friends that have moved 5 states away just for a year, knowing they're going to be back. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a pain. They're like, well, it looks good on the resume. And I'm like, all that to, you know, look good on a resume. And so I'm like, yeah, maybe you don't have to stick in the same little pot for 30 plus years. Mm-hmm. And nothing wrong with the people that do that, but it's like, let's venture out.
Yeah, you can certainly redefine yourself all the time these days, right? I feel like, and that's totally accepted. And, you know, yeah, I have a family member, like, well, I would say I've held jobs for about, well, not like I get kicked out of them, but, you know, every 2 years or so, it's like, you know, you're thinking about what the next step is, you know, not that I'm gonna do that now because I helped build this, but, you know, but this was something that was kind of churning all the time for the past 6 years. And then it's like, you finally, things align, right? And, you know, you can actually financially sustain yourself, you know, which is the key.
Still need to live, right?
Yes. Bills don't stop. Mm-hmm. So you started Pink Sheep Design. So can you talk a little bit about what Pink Sheep Designs is and what kind of services you offer?
Sure. So to give a little bit of backstory how it came around. So my friend and I am a triathlete. And so I joined a crew that was in town here, Triton Multisports, and they kind of branched off the first year that I was in there, and they had a Triton events side of it. So they would put on, you know, 5Ks, 10Ks, kids triathlons, and like the Nut House Challenge. And my friend that I was working with basically let me run free with the art side of it, which was phenomenal. So shirts, medals, all the posters, all of the swag and everything I got to do, which was absolutely amazing. And, you know, he likes to credit himself with, I got you going in that direction, which sometimes I hate giving him a little credit for that. But it was kind of nice just to go, this is it. Like my favorite things is logos and t-shirts and kind of getting that sort of whole ball together. And so then after I did that for a while, I was like, well, this is kind of neat. And I started doing a bunch of like self-taught stuff and skill shares and learning everything and buying the Adobe, you know, the setup and stuff. And then it kind of got to a friend of a friend needed a logo. And my sister-in-law owns Majestic Events in town and she wanted to rebrand. And it was like, okay, well, sure, I'll do this. And it was coming out of just doing it for fun, for free, when people are actually seeing it as a service. And that's when it was like, this could kind of be a cool thing. So then so I started Pink Sheep. Started is a very loose term. So I got a website, threw it out there just so that people could see my stuff, you know, and still working on a portfolio. That's always a fun project, ongoing. But it's one of those where I love putting a creative kick to something that someone has in their brain. And that first time that you talk to them and they're just spewing out all this stuff, and there's 10 gallons of stuff they're trying to get into a 5-gallon bucket, and you condense it down, send them their first logo, and there's nothing cooler than, holy crap, that's perfect. That's exactly what I envisioned. Or it's what I envisioned, but you twisted it, and there's something just so cool about that. And I think that's why I like doing the t-shirt designs too. You know, there's nothing neater than seeing down the street someone walking with your shirt that you've created. So I really tend to gravitate toward logo design. I've done a lot of print work with my husband's job, and then schools. And of course, you know, you get your name on the PTA board that you can do that. Next thing you know, you're doing all the school stuff, which is great. With Aaron, you know, Potbellies, I've been doing a lot of their print stuff. And so print, logos, t-shirt designs, and those sort of things. I have done a few murals, obviously living in the dental world. I've done a couple of dental office kids nooks and kids rooms. Working obviously at Penn's Dental across the way is that shades of green. I'm like, ooh, to get my hands on that wall. But so I'd like to get into, you know, murals and that sort of stuff too. But my big thing too with Pink Sheep, and this was what kind of my brainchild before COVID, it was I have a 9 and a 13-year-old daughter, and especially my oldest one, she loves art. And kind of running into the same thing I felt I ran into when I was in high school. There's just not a ton out there. There's a ton online. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's a great, and now they're kind of forced to be online. But a lot of the things that I was finding was like sign up and everyone paints the same picture and everyone does the same thing. And you have a little bit of variance, but I was loving the idea of having a space where kids could come in, like create their own logo, like brand themselves, make a stickers, put it on a skateboard, make a screen print a shirt, like get dirty, or like have a guerrilla like spray paint where they do graffiti and you have like this big industrial space where they can do it. And I mean, how cool at 13 to have like an opening where you put your art and like you invite your family and friends, and like just like an art opening like in New York, but that self-esteem for kids and stuff, because we have a room in our house where my 13-year-old can hang up their stuff and there's a sense of this pride. So I would love to do that down the road with Pink Sheep. So
yeah, that sounds super cool. It's always like you try and find that space on the wall at home or your like fridge that have that. That's funny you mentioned that. Like I remember growing up, we would like tape pictures on my granddad's wall, but he'd take them down and then we just do it again.
Oh yeah. Free space.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about just, kind of making it your own, and getting messy. I think nowadays, and the machines are beautiful, to be able to create all this online and digital stuff, but there's something about the pencil and there's something about the paint and there's something about getting messy. And at the end of it, looking at your clothes going, holy buckets. we had a blast, You
got your hands literally in it. And logo design's very hard because it's, taking a vision somebody has and basically making it static.
Well, and it's their baby. So they've grown their business and you're basically putting this whole persona in this one thing for their child, and so that's tricky too. And then that's also a little harder on our end, because I have a personal style. And so of course in my brain, I want to put my style on it, but you back up and you're like, I'm not making this logo for me. I'm making it for them, So there is that kind of pull back, you do your stuff. I'll do my own personal style at night, but I got to work on this for today. So dividing that is tricky.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it all end up looking like my style and Rochester would turn into my style.
I think that's something interesting to jump into. How do you, because all of us think that we're the customer that we're serving, but sometimes we're not. Sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. So how do you put your stamp on it, but maintain what the customer is asking for? What process have you kind of figured out for that?
Well, and my favorite thing to do is like we were talking about the 10 gallons of stuff in a 5-gallon bucket. And the first thing I always like to do is obviously the interview with them and what are they looking for and what does their business stand for? What does their competition look like? Because if in town, I did one for like plumbing, everything is red and blue, like hot and cold, the drip and the freeze, and it's just like, it's so overdone. But they want the faucet handle and they want this and they want that. And it's like, let's scale it down. Let's bring it down. But sometimes I'll actually throw them the first logo of exactly what they want, just to be like, it's so busy. It's so crazy. And we can't have this much stuff. And you need something that looks great on the side of a van. And you need something that looks tiny on a little business card. And so I think, sometimes people, they just have these great ideas, and by no means are they bad ideas, but it's got to work in a logo. And you might be able to put that 10 gallons of info on a t-shirt, or make it, kind of a side thing, but not your logo. And there have been a few times where I've been pretty blunt. I'm like, let it go. Like, let go of the idea of putting this totally literal part into the logo. It's going to make more sense without it. So sometimes, usually you can get around it with showing them other options and getting them to fall in love with that as opposed to being blunt. But sometimes you got to be blunt. Sometimes.
So when would you say you kind of officially started Pink Sheep Designs?
2017, I got the website. So I kind of think that's when I started it. I ended up going and actually interviewing a couple of designers in town, because that's the other thing too, looking around just to see where are the good ways that I can, network and brainstorm. I got a SCORE mentor through the SCORE program, which that was great. The hard part is they're a cheerleader, a really good cheerleader, but it's hard because they're not in your niche. Like my SCORE mentor was a realtor, which if I was looking to be a realtor, I'm sure she would be 8 million times more helpful. So it was great to have a cheerleader, but it wasn't really like, hey, I'm going to funnel you to this, or this. And so I ended up just cold calling some of these designers in town. And I'm like, can I just come and chit chat with you and kind of see what the plan is? Because being self-taught, I think the hardest thing for me is I have imposter syndrome, like nobody's business. Like, how dare I call myself a designer, and how dare I do this? And so I actually went and I interviewed a couple of them. And one, I still quote our little chat to this day. He's like, nobody has ever asked me for my degree when I make their stuff. Nobody has ever asked me for that. Obviously, if you're trying to get a job in a firm and that sort of thing. But he's like, if you're freelance and you go, and he's like, just do good work and don't be a dink. Like, it was just flat out like that. But I was mainly asking him, like, should I go to school? Should I like go through it just to check those boxes so that I feel a little bit more like I'm offering, some educated, stuff behind my self-taught stuff. And he said, he's like, you know what? He's like, yourself. He's like, if you're one that has to check those boxes and know why 2 + 2 = 4, go do it. But he's like, if you're not and you're comfortable self-learning, over the last couple of years, I've realized I do like knowing why 2 + 2 = 4. So I've got 1 more year left in school. So, and I think just because at my age too, I kind of miss school, strangely. And with the girls being home for homeschooling at the end of last year, I'm like, this is kind of fun. Like, we're all doing it together, and it was the perfect time. So here we are.
So you're going to
I'm
school
currently
right now for graphic design.
Yep, web design and graphic design.
Right.
There
Awesome.
are some times too where it's like, that's a networking thing too. And I'm almost looking at it more as, yeah, it's great to learn the background stuff, but it's also, and I've already made a few connections, so it's working.
So when you said you were teaching yourself and learning, like, I've heard everything from, learning through Linda to YouTube. I mean, we learned how to podcast through YouTube.
Oh yeah.
Were there any or Coursera, were there any key places that could be useful for other people just trying to get more information about business or anything, any kind of skill set?
Right. Skillshare is probably my absolute favorite, just because that one is not just design. Like, it had soft skills on there, because that's one of my things that I always struggle with, which is hilarious because anyone that knows me and has ever come in and had their teeth cleaned by me, I will talk your ear off, and I can just flow and go. But then it's so weird because you get me in a networking, like if I were to go to, a little networking function, it'd take me a little bit to kind of get into it. So I think, when you're cleaning teeth, you have a captive audience. So that's not really fair. I get to choose when you get to talk back to me. So Skillshare was awesome. Obviously, when you buy the Adobe suite, there's a bunch of little tutorials on there. I try not to go to YouTube too much, only because they're such short. Like, you go there and you can learn one, as far as design, one little thing on Illustrator, and then you've got to look somewhere else for other things. So for me, I kind of like if it's like a half-hour or longer course. So Skillshare is nice because you can go and say, I want the longer courses. So I really like that. And then, of course, Design Cuts was another one that had a bunch of tutorials. But I'm always amazed at the people who, like the designers. Like, there's one gentleman in England that I follow. Just on his webpage, obviously you can buy his fonts and buy his stuff, but then they've got tutorials. And it's just amazing to me how they are taking their time, and there's probably some funding part behind it, but they're taking their time and marking, videoing them doing this thing. And I just think that's pretty cool that they're helping the next person, So I think that's pretty cool. So maybe eventually, if I get good enough at one thing that I feel I can share, to do that. So, but Skillshare has been my go-to.
No, I agree with you though. On YouTube can be great because it's so accessible, but you're kind of having to vet the person too, because maybe they're not an expert, maybe they're wrong, and they tend to be pretty short, whatever, from 8 to 10 minutes. So you're not really getting a lot of meat on it. So you talked about, having this love for art when you were younger, moving away from it, kind of moving back, and then funneling your skill sets into Pink Sheep. Can you talk a little bit about, what was the thought process, and what were you kind of thinking through when you were like, this is a real thing, I'm going to go after it? And, who was involved in that conversation? Because, we always, when we teach business classes, we're like, you need to talk to your family about, what you're going to do. But, in reality, does that happen? I don't know. So What was your kind of process like in, I'm going to do this?
Well, I have to say, I mean, I love my husband. We dated for 10 years and we've been married for 15. So 25 coming around. And he's definitely one of my biggest cheerleaders, but he is very engineering brain, analytical, like definitely right brained, let's think it through. And, he has got the spreadsheets on all these decisions where I'm a little bit more like, blah, this is what I want to do. And this is great. And let's do this. And I think that's where your circle of other friends come in. And I remember like my neighbor, we get talking and I set up my new LinkedIn when I like started Pink Sheep and got that all. And under the heading, I said dental hygienist dabbling in graphic design. And she gets on and texts me and she's like, you've got to take that dabbling off. She's like, take it off. And I was like, but I'm not ready. She's like, you're ready, And so I think just taking those steps and like getting out there and texting that designer and saying, hey, can I just come down to your shop and see what's going on? And, see if this niche is something I like, or if it's something, you don't like. Obviously, again, with a captive audience at my work, I talk to a lot of my patients about it, and, getting kind of feedback. And that's the one thing I really have noticed since I've been talking about it, to like patients. There's so many people out there who have dabbling in little things too. And I think it's back to that. You don't just have to stay in your lane of your career. And it just kind of really opened my eyes like, oh my gosh. And I'm working with a woman now who's in her mid 60s, who's, starting a business, a little, mind you, a side thing, but I'm like, everybody kind of has this little thing. And so I think the group of girlfriends, the group of, business people like Tiffany down Terra Loco with just all of our race stuff, and she reaches out for stuff and I need a design. And I mean, just having that little friend group that knows you're not degreed up the wall and but they like your stuff. And so that was good, but I still haven't taken the dabbled off the LinkedIn though.
Well, I think like you said, when you're producing a good product, like nobody cares that you have all these like certifications on your wall or degrees. I mean, it's great. I feel like I try and learn around things too much and sometimes get bogged down in that when I don't need it.
Right.
But, oftentimes, just produce a good end result. And that's all people are looking for.
Well, and I think it's cool just for my girls to see it too. Just like mom, like totally kicked out at like 35 when I kind of really started to do side stuff. And just to see that like, it was scary, I mean, mind you, I never left like my full-time job, although I work 3 days a week, I can't complain. But it's like, she's doing this, like she's going back to school. And I think just that is so cool to have my girls see me do that. So that's been really cool too.
Yeah, that has to be just a really fun thing to share with them and have them see, what you're doing. Do they have any interest in entrepreneurship or business at all, do you think? Or
well, it's funny because my oldest one, she is like a drop of blood and she is about ready to pass out. She once told me she wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. So
maybe not.
I'm not sure about that. But actually, when we were at homeschool, she had a project that she had to do where she had to design a house for like a mythical goddess that they were studying. And she's like, oh, because she loves art and loves math. And she got the proportions right and angles and like all this sort of stuff. And she kind of looked at me and she goes, is this a job? Like, is this a thing? Like, and I'm like, yeah, like architecture for sure. So, she's been kind of dabbling as much as a 13-year-old can dabble, in thoughts of where that would lead. But, right now it's just, they're a little jealous of my homework. Last night, my 9-year-old came by and we were doing pixel art was my homework for last night. She's like, I wish my homework was drawing. I wish my homework was doing this, So I think they're a little jealous right now, but so far, like I say, I haven't seen a spark of entrepreneurship yet, but we've got some strong family, friends, and neighbors that I think will be good mentors as they get older.
Yeah, that's so funny that it's just like a little hub out there in where you guys are. But yeah, I guess on that note, did you ever imagine you'd be running your own business? Like, did you like doing that kind of stuff and kind of forging a path? Or
Yes and no. I mean, I think we all generally like the idea to work for ourselves and have that flexibility and those sorts of things. But I have always been a little cold feet of like jumping in, and even just the whole thing about still working. It's like, I don't want to have to hustle and find all the side jobs all the time and this and that. So even right now, it's as much as I would love to just jump full fledged into it. It's like, and especially during COVID times, although I was busier with the graphic design stuff during the lockdown, dentistry wasn't going. So I'm like, well, this is great. I've got time to do all these Kumbaya t-shirts and signage for everybody's stores and stuff. But there's that little bit of fear of finding all of your people. And so I think I keep finding myself going, well, maybe I'll just get a job, and be a designer for somebody else. But then it's like, why? Get out there and do stuff. And I still love hygiene. I still love dental hygiene. And I don't think I would stop and lose my license, because that's, a pain to get it back if you let it lapse. And I love my patients, and they're fun, and I have a blast. So I think I could probably do a little bit of both until the early retirement to my husband, wink, wink. But, and just to kind of marry the two as best as you can. But I don't think I ever saw myself. My husband had a business. I was almost 9 months pregnant with our first. He was an electrician, and he came home one day. It was like right around 2008 when all the housing market and stuff. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I signed the book. He's like, I'm out. And I go, what does that mean? And he's like, I'm done with electrical. And I'm like, we are 9 months pregnant, just built a house. Like, what are you doing? And he's started his own business and did his own thing. And so he has been a great mentor with that. But then I've seen the backside of it, and then of course with my neighbor hearing that side of it. So some of that stuff's a little scary when you see the back end of not just, oh, I can go on vacation whenever I want and I can work mobile and do this. It's like, there's some scary stuff to it. Obviously sole proprietor is a little nicer, but yeah. So it surprised me. It kind of surprised me a little bit that I kind of liked it, but it's still a little scary.
Yeah. There's definitely risk associated with everything. Totally. So definitely tons of risk. And usually it's not what you expect anyway to happen.
But it hasn't been like the things that I thought were scary, like taxes or, and the billing and invoicing and my husband, again, is a good cheerleader. He's like, know your worth. He's like, put it out there. He's like, if they don't like it, they'll look somewhere else, and it's not worth your hassle.
I think that's one of the hardest things, figuring out pricing, especially when you can do whatever. Right. You could charge whatever you want. We all could, right. Or most of us, even if when you have like a physical product, but then like the cost of goods, right. So to speak. But yeah, how did you kind of figure out your pricing, and what was that process like for you?
Well, of course, the first many were free. The first ones were free or trade for product, and actually the last one I did for Tiffany, I was like, I need a new pair of running shoes.
There you go.
I'm like, I wonder if we could barter. So there's, you start out like that, but then it gets to the point where I've got money out into it. I bought a new computer. I've had to pay the monthly fees for Adobe and all those sorts of things. So it kind of gets to the point where this is not a hobby anymore. This is, this has got to be a paid thing. So there's a 5-pound book called The Designer's Guide to Ethics and Pricing. And so reading that, kind of was a nice way to shuffle it in, but adjust it for, yes, I'm new, so it might take me 2 hours to do what a seasoned designer could do in an hour. I'm not going to charge you, that high end. So that's why a lot of times I'll do a flat fee. I won't do the hourly sort of stuff. And like I say, I haven't done any big projects yet that I've had to deal with like account agent, like account departments and those sorts of things. So it's been nice. I'm usually dealing right with the business owner or, someone directly under them. So I haven't been too muddled in the account part of it.
Yeah. So can you talk through, what did it feel like when you got your first customer, and then how are you continuing to kind of build out? Because that's the most exciting part, right? You get somebody like, yes.
Well, and also getting the first one that's not a family or a friend.
Well, that's what I meant. The first paid one. Because we all do that. We all do, the free stuff, because you got to get experience too and, figure out your process. But, when you got your first paying one, what did that feel like? And then how What have been successful strategies to expand that base from there for you?
So the first paid one definitely felt really good. I definitely took a lot more time to structure emails a little bit better, because that was one thing that when you're dealing with your friends and family, you know, not coming across maybe as business-like in an email. And so that was one of the big things, just to switch over to, here's your format, here's this, these are the decisions you need to make, here's a deadline. And I'm really good about keeping prompt with deadlines and making sure, and I find that that's a huge thing for people, obviously, when they're paying for a service, to be on time and deliver stuff when you say you're going to deliver. And I try to over deliver. That's one thing. One of my favorite designers, Aaron Draplin, he's like, over deliver. I mean, they're almost to the point where they're like, this girl has given us a ton of options, almost to a fault per se. But then they're going to talk to the next person and go, this girl gave us 4 different designs and got us thinking about this, and maybe tickled our mind like, oh, maybe we do need a mural on that big wall over there, or maybe we do need this, or a t-shirt would be cool. And so just to kind of get them thinking about other things, which would grow ideas for what they want to do next. I do think, obviously, that was one of my big things last year, is to try to get a little bit more networking. And do some of like the, Collider's got like those little social hour things, and do some of those, but then
not right now.
And then COVID hit. So yeah, I think that would be my next goal, is just to get networking now that I feel a little bit more confident, have a little more, jobs under my belt, and feel like, yeah, I've got something to share.
I think that's one of the biggest things, no one knows you're doing something until you tell them.
Right.
Especially if they are your patients, they just think of you as, in the dentistry field.
Yes.
And they're not
so pigeonholed.
Yeah. They don't know you as the graphic designer.
One perfect example. So in one of my classes, a web design class, right at the beginning, the first day, it was the intro, and, introduce yourself online. It's all online now. And they're like, oh yeah, and if you have a website, throw it up there. And I didn't put it up there. I was like, no, like, this is the teacher that teaches web design is going to see that I did a click and drag GoDaddy, website. And I'm like, no. So finally I had to FaceTime him for a question for class, and we got chit chatting about stuff. And then he said, oh, well, do you have a website? And I said, well, yeah. And so I sent it to him, and he's like, this is really good. And then he networked me to someone in town who's sometimes, when he's overflowed with work, might need a helping hand. So I'm like, okay, stop selling yourself short before anyone else has a chance to, because you're not doing yourself any favors. And so that's been a hard lesson for me, to get out from under that thought that you've already taking your shoes off before you've even gotten running.
Yeah, absolutely. You're holding yourself back more than anybody else.
Totally. And if you throw it out there and it's not their style, so what? Who cares? Or if you throw it out there, and I'm the first one to tell, if they came back and said, I have this idea, and they threw it out and it was like motion graphics or all this sort of stuff, and I'd be like, that's not me. That's not my forte. I'm going to take way too long to do it. I'm the first one to say this is out of my wheelhouse. And so I don't think it would ever be anything you'd get in over your head, but you never know until you try and get that first question or email back saying, can you do this? Yes or no? Then you decide.
Yeah. And it's important to disqualify customers too. Like you said, if it's just not something you can deliver, or it's not in your expertise, then let's not make everyone unhappy with this procedure.
It's okay to say no. It's okay to let them know that. So,
Yep, which is a hard lesson to learn. Like you said, you work in a local dentist office. You're a triathlete, a mom, a friend, neighbor, whatever, everything. How have you found balance, like, between, job and this and life in general? What's kind of been your strategies? Do you block out time? Do you just fit things in? What works for you?
There's 36 usable hours in a day, right?
Yeah.
That's what I always thought. I have to say, Ironman training really, like, in 2014, I did my first Ironman, and that year was the first year that we were doing the Triton events races. And we had 5 races that year, and training, and I had a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. and I was working 4 days a week at that time. And so I learned in that year, which I was just thinking about it this morning. I'm like, what did I think I was so busy with in my 20s? Like, seriously. And now you add school to it now, this go around.
I forgot about school. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Let's add that in too.
But then it's one of those where that year, it just really dawned on me that and I'm kind of a schedule nerd, and obviously dental hygiene, we're on a schedule, and you've got to keep it, and you've got to be back at this time and keep moving. And there's lots of moving parts. So I find myself, I do better when I'm almost I don't want to say over scheduled, but like, here is your 1 hour to do this. And if it doesn't get done in this 1 hour, I'm not sure when I'm going to get it in. And so it's like, this is your time to do what you need to do. And I love early mornings. Like, I'm up at 5 no matter what. And whether it's getting a workout in or if it's the quiet time to get homework done. When I used to have my long bike rides, I'd get up at 5 so I could be done by 9 o'clock. So I could be up, get the kids ready, and do that sort of stuff. So I credit Ironman training with that, for that.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm kind of the same way. My days are usually blocked off like from start to finish. And if they're not, I don't know what to do.
When you're on taper week and like there's less training, you're just, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Time.
Yeah, I have my paper running logs like right at the end of my desk that are, I don't know. I'm just finishing up a half marathon next week. I mean, because we don't have them.
Talk about the medals in the back.
Oh, see, you could tell you're a triathlete because you know what they are. Everyone's like, what are those? And
I'm over here like Med City. Okay, I see that one. I see some 10Ks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a weird year. I actually really wanted to sign up for the Med City Marathon next year. And one of the people who runs in Collider, he's like, I wouldn't sign up for anything until right now, until he's like, I don't even know that
2021
going to be like having in-person events next spring and summer. So we'll hold off. I saw one of my favorite ones is, it's up there because they're stumps, but, now it's Surf the Murph at Murphy Hanaran in Savage.
Yes.
So they have a 25K and a 50K, and I guess it's happening this weekend.
See, now my friend and I are just dabbling with the thought of an ultra marathon, but the backyard ones where they do the loops.
Oh, man.
They just had the one in Tennessee this past weekend, and the Courtney Duwaller or whatever her name is, she went 276 miles.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no.
It's just, yeah. I enjoy ultra. Like I've done a couple 50Ks, nothing beyond that. But if you've done a marathon, it's actually, I think, easier on your body just because you're going slower. You're eating.
It's like you have to reset your idea. Because when I brought it up to my training friend, she's assuming like 8-minute miles. And I'm like,
oh God, no.
Like, you have to reset your brain on what your goals are. And so that one's kind of neat because it's 4-mile loop, and every hour on the hour you do a loop until the last person's standing. But then you have a home base, and if you have 4 friends, you can still be a part of it. Because I think with the like 50-miler point to point, you drop out here, you don't see your friend ever again until they're all done. So I like the camaraderie of that. So add ultra marathon training to next year.
Yeah. So what is your favorite event in the triathlon? Do you prefer one?
See, I was a competitive swimmer growing up. So I love the swim, and I'm always mad because it's obviously the shortest part of it, but I love the swim. Run second, and bike. The only reason I don't like the bike is because people can buy speed. It's not just you in the water and you in the road. Like, you can get a cooler bike, better gear, better shifters, and that sort of stuff. And it's so lonely. On the road, you can sit and talk, and on the bike, you're not supposed to be close enough to people for like drafting. And I'm like, 6 hours by yourself is kind of boring. So I'm usually the one singing on the bike, and people are like, are you singing?
Oh man. Well, if you do an ultra, then definitely get a training partner, because you're not going to train for 6 hours, but it might be 4 or 5, depending.
Which my one coach is like, imagine how much faster you could go if you just shut up.
It's a good time for books on tape and podcasts and stuff like that.
catch up on my Rochester Rising.
Yeah, there you go.
I digress. Sorry.
I think you answered a lot of my questions that I had for you. I think the biggest thing was, COVID too. And it sounds like, that really wasn't an issue for your business because, it's online. People are still needing, branding and stuff. I don't know if there was a little decrease in that with people thinking about, long-term
Businesses.
expenditures and things like that.
And nobody was doing most people weren't doing new businesses, but now I think it's kind of funny. I'm seeing a little bit of an uptick because commercial real estate is now available really cheap if there's some places. And I had one guy, he's like, I hate to take advantage of someone that lost this building, but he's like, this is a prime spot. And so I think we'll see a little ebb and flow. The one thing I wish I knew more about was like web e-commerce and everything. Cause like my other neighbor, she works with a lot of the downtown places. And she's like, there are some stores that didn't have an e-commerce because there's such a one-on-one shopping experience. And she's like, here, we're trying to set them up with e-commerce and figure that out. But yeah, that's not my strong suit as of yet. So
yeah, that's a huge thing now, even with restaurants, having easy ordering where someone doesn't have to like be on the phone because that just takes up somebody's time then when you are trying to, minimize costs anyway. So yeah, that is a big thing.
I think it was more, the signage and the shirts. Yeah, we made a lot of "We're in this together" shirts, and we did the Orinoco one. We did a couple of other ones. So, I mean, that was, you make the best of the situation. And like after homeschooling, we made a couple shirts. Like, we did it.
So are your kids homeschooling now or are they back in?
So they're at the Rochester Catholic School. So they're 5 days a week all in, and knock on wood, 6-7 weeks, nothing. So it gives me good hope for down the road.
Yeah, I'm sure they enjoy that better too than being at home. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was about, my last question. I just have some kind of fun ones to wrap up here that I've been asking everybody. So yeah, I think with COVID and everything, we were all kind of hunkered down, but now that we're getting back out somewhat into the world, where's your favorite place to be at in the community here? Where's your kind of go-to place?
A go-to spot.
Whether that's, somewhere you're going for training or.
Yeah, right. It used to be the rack. No, I think, just really getting out now that I'm starting to do like the trail running just to try to get, and I didn't realize we had as many trails as we do. I used to always kind of be such a snob, like, oh, there's nowhere, to go hiking, and I just have never been on the lookout for it. And I was going to get a pair of snowshoes and, out in wooded Orinoco out here, there's plenty of places. So I think my goal this winter is to even explore like some of that stuff and just get out and do that. And I'm kind of a book nerd, so I'm kind of bummed that the library is not sit and go hang out. So yeah, I've just been kind of, hunkering down.
Yeah. Have you found a favorite trail yet?
So we went out and did Oxbow, a friend of mine, a couple of weeks ago, but she's been doing a ton of looping Corey Hill, and she's like, there is way more out there. And the thing I like about Corey Hill is you're kind of boxed in by roads and buildings, so you really can't get lost. Because I have a pretty good sense of direction generally, but you get me in the woods, and it is that's another thing that worries me about a long ultra. I'm like, I will be the one that's like, we're missing a runner at mile 35. Like,
it does happen. It happens. Yeah.
So to me, I'm like, I have a good sense of direction to get me in the woods. So yeah, I'll have to try, but there you'll run into a road or a building or the prison,
Yeah. Oxbow's pretty contained too.
Yeah. Not too far.
No, you can't go too far. And there you do hit a road, at some point. Or a farmhouse. Yeah. Well, since you said you are a book nerd, what are you reading or listening to right now?
So, like I said, one of my favorite designers, Aaron Draplin, came out with a book last year. And then his new thing that he was promoting this past week, which is a delayed mail. I was supposed to get it today. I'm so bummed. But it's the Busy Beaver Button Company in Chicago has a book out about 125 years of the button. like just the little pin button, like on your jacket and everything. It is a female owned store in Chicago, and it's just the coolest little thing. I would love to reach out to her and go, do you want one of those up here? Like to do a franchise of Busy Beaver Button Company. I just like saying it. So that'll be my new read when that comes. But yeah, it's 125 years of buttons and how buttons have changed lives, and how something like 1 inch around can be just a huge, I mean, it's something you wear. I mean, what says something more about what you are than something you put on your shirt and your jacket? So I'm super excited. I'm totally going to nerd out on that.
Yeah, I'm sure that's going to be a really interesting story.
It'll be very interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Has there been one or more than one resource in town that you felt was key for Pink Sheep, whether that's a person, an organization, education, anything like that? What's been really key for your business?
Well, and I think that's the hard one, because I have been so like in my bubble of, oh my gosh, I can't say I'm a designer. I can't do this and I can't do that. And I really have been just doing a lot of out there as far as like looking at other designers not in my own local bubble. And so I would definitely put that on my list of 2021 is to do. And actually next week I'm meeting with one in town and trying to slowly get out there. So that's my big thing, besides Insta stalking some of the some of the local ones. So I hate to say it, but I haven't really, besides a few people I've talked to probably a year and a half ago. I need to get out there.
We used SCORE in the beginning, right?
Yes. So I did use that. Like I say, that was a great cheerleader and kind of a starting thing. And she was actually the one that said, make a business card. That's your first homework between now and when I see you next, make a business card. So then I made a business card, and then we went to this like networking thing, and she's like, hand them out. So I handed them out, and like 3 people came up to me, and that was early on in it. And they were like, oh, I've got this idea for this, and I've got this idea for that. And I remember leaving that networking thing like, don't everybody call at once. Like holy buckets. But SCORE was great, like I say, for a cheerleader. But I think once you get kind of that initial rah, then you've got to kind of hit your focus group a little better, and funnel it down a little bit more.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. That was my last question for you. I'll just ask if you have any final thoughts and where people can find Pink Sheep Designs online.
Final thoughts. I'm definitely hoping to Pink Sheep to do a little bit of an all-girl racing team next year. Ooh. That's something I'm kind of looking forward to. I was also dabbling in, and I don't know about if you noticed, years ago, triathlon, there was hardly any clothing for women. Like it was all red, black, or blue. Like those were your options, long, short, nothing was cool. And in the last like 5 years, there's been some that have come out. I would love to dabble in that area too, and kind of that racing. And my dream job would be to like fuse kids art, triathlon, and like Pink Sheep, like somehow get that all going, and like a kids team would even be fun. So hopefully Pink Sheep Racing 2021 and some kids classes. But yeah, I mean, otherwise pinksheepdesigns.com online. Check out my website there, and yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
So I love this idea of a Pink Sheep racing team.
Oh my gosh, I've got some ideas. The only thing is there's so many like sheep puns that I have to contain myself, because there's something like what the flock and little flockers and and there's so many like sheep puns, so I have to contain myself. And then also like greeting cards for runners and triathletes. And I think runners and triathletes in general are kind of their own special little group. Yeah. But like decals on your bike or, those sorts of specializing things. But I was thinking too of maybe doing some fun little like greeting cards for triathletes. So I've got one here that's like the Queen of England. And yeah. Because we call it your Queenie when you're sitting on your bike for too long. And okay. I'm sorry, your Queenie is mad. Oh my God. So I don't know. There might be a greeting card line coming too. So that's the only downfall too. I think when you're not constrained by this pays the bills, like I have to do just logos because that's a moneymaker. Mm-hmm. It's great because you can look at all this other stuff, but then I also need to focus in a little bit and find that little niche. But the fun projects have got to be there. Otherwise there's no fun to doing it. So
yeah, I love it. I love a triathlon and running specialty cards. I mean, that's a real thing. I mean,
oh yeah,
it's a totally different breed. No one understands like when you lose your toenails or like gotta go poop in the woods somewhere. Like it happens.
I mean, there's just not that. Hallmark doesn't have a section for that. Come on now.
No.
So I want to get on that. I'll get on that.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate this conversation today and your time and learning more about what you're doing.
Awesome.
So thanks so much for your time.
It was great.
Thanks so much to Cathy for sharing her story with us today and having this wonderful conversation. I'm really looking forward to these runner-specific greeting cards. Definitely a niche that Hallmark is not filling. So I look forward to those hopefully coming out sometime in the future. But check our show notes for links to some of the resources that Cathy mentioned. Again, hopefully some of these can help you build and grow your business here in Rochester and beyond. We have new podcasts coming out here on Rochester Rising every Wednesday. You can find our podcast through our website at rochesterrising.org, as well as on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube, where we premiere our video on our YouTube channel, or our latest podcast on our YouTube channel every Wednesday at noon. And next week will actually be our 200th podcast episode. So stay tuned for that. We have something special to share with you all. And you can always find more stories of entrepreneurship on our website at rochesterrising.org, where we have other article and video content to share with you. All right, that's a wrap for us at the podcast today. Be sure that you are subscribed in wherever you listen into your podcast content so that you never miss a story of innovation and entrepreneurship coming out of Rochester, Minnesota. Join us next week for our 200th episode.